Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you doing?
Quite well, Brian. It's definitely becoming fallish around here. All of the ghouls and ghosts are out and people have those gigantic skeletons on their lawn. And I keep wondering to myself, where do they store those things in the off season?
You know what? I saw someone make a Lego skeleton because I've got a Lego skeleton about, 8 inches tall, which is very cool.
Nice.
My kids it was 3D printed. Well, some people made one out of styrofoam that was like 18 feet tall.
Holy moly.
Took forever to build. And I'm thinking, great, awesome. Where do you put it? You don't want to do this once and not again. I'm thinking, what do you do? How do you store something like that? And I've got a shed, but I could never think of putting something that big into it. So I've wondered the same thing.
I've got some people have like holiday decoration, pods or something, or, little offsite things. Because seriously, some of the decorations I see would take up my entire garage. I'm not going to put them anywhere else. And I kind of want my car in there. So it's like, this doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Well, before we get started, we've got an interesting conversation today. But before we get started, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe. I looked at our demographics and guess what? Like only 30% of the people that listen to this show regularly are subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. It helps us out quite a bit and can help us do a lot more and get a broader reach and a wider reach to people. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, comment, like, do all of those things. We really appreciate it. Check us out on Instagram, Moving Combos, as well as our Gmail account, movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. All right. So today I threw this out to Nora because a friend of mine texted me yesterday or emailed me and asked me about footwear. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what? This is a really interesting question because as a fitness professional, I know you've gotten the question. I get it probably once a week, if not more often, because people need new shoes. And it's like, so what do I recommend? It's like, ooh, that's stepping into a thing and there's lots of controversy. So I thought, you know what? Let's discuss it today and just see where we go.
Yeah. And I think our point here is not, like Brian and I both have decided, we both know we're not at all dogmatic on this. Mm-mm. I've found some clients do really well with barefoot stuff. Some people have the most padded shoes on the planet. Some people need arch support, like all kinds of things. Yep. So I think we want to just open up the conversation and talk about different options, different ways to think about it, different ways for maybe you or your clients to find the right shoe for them.
Absolutely.
Without, again, paying quite so much attention to what the experts tell you should be feeling, because it just doesn't seem to work that well. Like everybody needs something different, or a lot of people do.
Well, I had a client who came to me because she was having foot problems, and she was a ultra endurance athlete. Okay. She did ultra marathons. She did triathlons, and she came to me because she was having foot issues, and the doctor basically said, "Oh, I think you're going to need surgery." And so started working with her. Okay. And she was wearing barefoot type of shoes. And, I'm not the first times I've seen that. Whatever floats your boat. And I said, when did this start? And she said, well, it started after I started wearing these shoes. And I was thinking, okay, put two and two together here. I'm not a genius, but I can kind of figure this one out. And I'm like, okay, why did you switch to those? And I said, when did you switch? She said about 8 months, a year ago. I said, okay, well, why did you switch? Oh, I went to a new doctor and he said I absolutely needed to wear these barefoot shoes, that they were the best things for running and they're the best things for your body. So I immediately went out and bought them and started training 10 to 15 mile runs a day in new shoes, barefoot. And immediately I went, okay, bingo. Basically they changed the way you were using your foot mechanics. 100% changed it. And she actually
Immediately for miles and miles and miles, right? Immediately with long distances. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like she wore them for an hour in the afternoon walking around the house to get used to it. No, she went out running that, the day she bought them. And because she did that with other shoes all the time. And
Right.
she actually tore her posterior tibialis. And yeah, and I said, oh, there's not a whole lot that we can do because you tore the muscle. It was a pretty massive tear. And she needed to eventually have surgery. We did what we could to strengthen the area, but she was never going to get completely out of pain if she wanted to run for the mileage that she did. And again, she switched too quickly. So that's why I'm not dogmatic on any of this whatsoever, because I believe everybody's feet are completely different. You and I have talked about this before because you like something that's a little bit more barefoot with less padding. I like to have a little bit more padding under my feet.
Yep.
So there's the difference between us. And also I'm a bigger guy than you. I've got more weight. I've got other orthopedic things than you do. You've got different ones than I do. So we're coming at different bodies all the time. So it's hard to be dogmatic and really say you have to do this.
Well, and starting with just the idea that your foot and how your foot hits the ground with every single step tells the entire rest of your body what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brian, you probably haven't worn high heels often, but women you probably have.
Not too often.
Or you've probably worn flip-flops or something, right?
Yeah.
Like Zori's or whatever. So just knowing that the difference that your foot responds just when you change from, let's say, a running type shoe to a flip-flop, or in women's case, from a flat shoe to a high-heeled shoe, like everything changes. Your body moves this way, your knees move that way. So any change in footwear has an effect all the way up the chain, and can have a profound one. So I just want to start with that idea that your footwear really does set the rest of you up for better or for worse,
Absolutely.
in terms of how things go.
Absolutely. And I also find that what you've done up until now makes a difference.
Yes.
And I say it like
What you're
this
used
because
to.
what you're used to. Growing up in Hawaii, slippas, which, like you said, flip-flops, we call them slippas, that was the norm. I mean, and people would actually have dress slippers that they would wear to, nice events or to church. It was just, that's what we wore a lot. And they're very flat. They have zero arch support. And I haven't worn them in years and years and years. I mean, I moved away from Hawaii, in 98. So it's been a long, long time since I even had a pair on. I've gone back and bought a pair. This was years ago. And I'd been away for maybe 15 years. And I went back and I was like, oh, these were pretty cool. I said, oh, I'll wear these. They were the most uncomfortable things on my feet that I'd ever had. I said, I can't do this anymore because they had no support. I'd gotten used to wearing shoes. And
and you're gripping with your toes, right? You're doing that weird toe grip,
which the time.
Yeah.
And we call it Howley feet. Howley, white person.
Yeah.
Howley feet. So I literally was like, oh my gosh, my feet have really changed from being in shoes for such a long period of time. Now, take that to someone who didn't grow up like me, who grew up on the mainland in shoes from the time they were probably 2 or 3 years old and have always had some decent support, and telling them suddenly you need to do this or that and make a drastic change. You're going to change everything up the kinetic chain every time that foot touches the ground. It can't not do that.
Exactly. So I grew up in Southern California. So I did wear flip-flops a lot, and also just was barefoot, like as much as I could possibly be. In our house, the first thing you did actually inside or outside sometimes was like throw your shoes off at the end of the day, and then you were barefoot the rest of the day.
Yep.
And one of the things too, to think about what you do with your feet is most people, I would say, don't do much with their feet. Their feet stick in shoes, and the shoes act a bit like a cast, actually, right? It's really, they often will immobilize the foot to some extent, depending on the shoe. Yep. If you think about a men's stiff dress shoe,
oh man,
right? There's just not, like, you're not getting a lot of movement at the metatarsal. You're not just getting a lot of movement. You're kind of lifting the foot up and putting it down, right? You may kind of roll heel to toe, but you're not getting that roll through the foot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people start with that. I see like my baby grandnieces and nephews in these like super stiff little shoes from the time they're 3, little cute little high tops. Well, that's, in my opinion, that's stupid, but that's another controversy we can talk about. But right. And then basically the feet don't get that ability to really get strong and get flexible. I was a modern dancer, so I spent a lot of time working on my feet because you're on releve and you're here and you're moving. And so my feet, when I stopped dancing and I broke my foot, that's why I stopped dancing. And I went into wearing shoes. Like I wanted shoes that gave me some of that mobility because I had been using that mobility for my whole growing up time, really. And so for me, that's why I prefer a more barefoot shoe because I'm used to having more ability to move my foot. And that's great for me because I'm trained that way.
Right.
But, like somebody like most of the people that I know were never trained to use their feet. So like you think about your runner and they're suddenly told to go from support to flat and their body doesn't know what to do with that.
Yep. Exactly. It's changing their mechanics. And she said, I also started changing to more of a toe running position rather than heel toe because she found running more of a heel toe mid strike type of running. It felt uncomfortable. So she
in those shoes.
In those shoes. So she went to being more of a toe runner. So I said, okay, you're doing so many miles. Yeah. And just think of how many repetitions you've done. She was in her early 40s at this point. I said, how many repetitions have you done in your lifetime? How many billions of strides have you run on a regular basis? And suddenly you're changing everything about it. I said, no wonder your muscles immediately fought back.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's something just to think about. If you are thinking about changing the style of shoe, you have to ask yourself, what is your foot used to a certain degree?
Right. And make a gradual change. And everybody who is sensible about changing to anything, whether it's barefoot or whether it's some other kind of footwear, do it slowly. Like like you said, an hour a day, take a walk in them for an hour. And then depending how much your usual physical activity is, right. And then increase that slowly over time until the body accommodates. One other little thing, I'm thinking about your client who, tore their posterior tib. For a long time, I have a leg length difference. So for a long time, I wore a heel lift on my left side. And then one time I decided, okay, I'm going to stop wearing the heel lift. I'm going to actually change and do like a whole foot lift. So I just was going to change the mechanics of that. It's been 3 years now, and my Achilles on my left side is still short.
Yes.
From roughly 20 years, actually probably 30 years actually, of having that heel lift in. And it's like it is slowly adapting, but dang, is it slow. Yes. So, you think about whatever that running pattern is, it creates tension patterns in all of the muscles of the feet and then of the whole lower leg and really all the way up into the hip, pelvis, and torso. But basically that whole lower leg. So if you suddenly change that, you can really stress those muscles to the point of, again, straining, tearing, tendonitis, all those kind of issues. If you're not slow and gradual with it, allow those tissues to adapt to that new foot position.
What's interesting, bringing that up, doing it for a longer period, start out slow and working your way up. What I find is the majority of people that come and ask me these questions are usually trying to fix a problem, number one. Sometimes it's just, I need a new pair of shoes. What do you recommend? Cool. Right. But a lot of times they have something wrong they have low back pain, they have knee pain, they have hip pain, something like that. Yeah. They go online. They ask Dr. Google, and what happens? Oh, try this shoe.
Do this. Right.
Yeah, this shoe will take care of all your problems. And immediately they want to do it. And because they want to get rid of their problems immediately, they throw away their old shoes and are in these 24/7. They have to wear these because it's going to solve their problem. Look, there's no panacea out there. There's no quick cure for anything. Can certain things help a little bit? Sure, a little bit. But let's face it, nothing is going to be the quick, easy fix that we all hope. We all would love to take a pill and be cured of everything, or try on a pair of, shoes and immediately be cured. It's not going to happen. I did it. I went to zero to fix my back. 15, 20 years ago, I went to those zero shoes, those earth shoes that have zero
Yeah.
drop. This was before that was a thing. I felt like I was going backwards because they literally, my heel was almost lower than my toes. And I was like, I walked so funny for about a week. And I said, I can't do this.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
so uncomfortable. My knees were locked out. My back, I said, this is making my back worse. And again, it was touted to be a cure for your low back because it forces you to bend your knees and it corrects your spinal alignment. Well, on me, it didn't work.
Right, because that's not the correction you needed.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
And so I think the lesson here, okay, we're at minute 15. The lesson here is listen to your own body about your footwear. Right. That's the key thing. Is yes, you can certainly try things. You can certainly go to your local store and have them give you some advice on things.
Absolutely.
But if you can afford it, and I know this gets to be a little tricky because sometimes, you spend $150 on shoes, then you try another pair, it gets a little crazy. But if you find a pair that really works for you, then what I also recommend, this is a little funny, but what I also recommend is buy 3 pairs of that model. Because if you go to try that model again in 6 months or whenever your shoes are out, it won't be there. I guarantee you, it won't be there. And one of the things that a lot of my runners, particularly my runners, is they'll often find, I've seen this time and time again, they have a pair of shoes. It's their favorite pair of shoes. They wear it for 3 to 6 months, and then they start to have foot problems. Right. And then they buy a new pair of shoes and they're good for 3 to 6 months and then start to have foot problems because everything breaks down. The foam breaks down. And one of the tricks that my podiatrist told me, which I thought was fabulous, was buy 3 pairs and alternate them. Wear 1 pair 1 week, 1 pair the next week, 1 pair the next week. And you keep a much more consistent load on your foot for a much longer period of time, which in that case, like so many of my clients, that would just decrease this kind of, cycle of improving and disimproving with every time their shoes wore out.
I was recommended that from a shoe professional, and because I'm in sneakers all the time, that's all I wear.
Exactly.
I own 1 pair of dress shoes, and if you ask me today where they were, I can't tell you. They're in my closet somewhere. If I have to go someplace fancy, I'll dig them out. I'll find something. But I'm in sneakers. That's what I wear. That's what we do for a living. I'm in these. And I was breaking down every 3 to 4 months and buying another pair, and at $120 to $150 a pair, they get to be costly, but it's a cost of doing business and figure that's the way it is here. And a foot professional told me, exchange it out every single day. And he recommended 2 pair. Buy 2 pair, change it every day, and I guarantee you it'll last you 9 months instead of the 6 months that 2 pairs normally would have. And it did. And I thought, wow, it really did. I probably almost lasted an entire year before I felt as though they had broken down. And that was a significant difference for me. And I don't know if it's allowing things to relax and, in between uses. I don't know. I don't know the magic behind it or the science behind it, but it did seem to help.
I think the foam recovers. My understanding is foam takes a while to recover, that whatever cushioning they've got in there, because there's all kinds of, but it takes a while to recover. And it also allows it to actually dry out. So, if you sweat it all, which most of us do to some extent in our feet, it allows that to dry out and just literally recover. So a couple of other little things here. One is thinking about specific shoes for specific scenarios and other kinds of ways of managing shoes. A couple of things that I think about. One thing I think about is how wide is the toe box?
Yes.
Right? Because for many people, shoes fashion often dictate that there's a relatively narrow toe box. Now, if you're tight in the front of your foot, that's fine. If you've got neuromas, if you've got a very broad space between your toes or just kind of a wide forefoot, then you're going to get pinched and sminched and stuff like that. So looking at that, there's also something called a curved last or a straight last. And if you look at the bottom of the shoe, you can kind of tell that the heel is, let's see, if I was looking at the bottom of the shoe, the heel would be, the toe would curve a little bit away from the heel. It would be towards the midline if you're standing on it. And that's a curved last, and other ones are straight. And different people walk different ways and have different foot structure. And I know for me, like I always look for a wide toe box and a little bit of a curved last because I have a great big toe. So those are little things that like, look at the shoes that you like. If you've got a pair of shoes that really work for you, and just look, what does the bottom of the sole look like? Does it curve? Is it flat? Is it a big toe box? Is it a more narrow toe box? And the other thing I look at is how much arch support does it have? And where is the arch support? Because that varies wildly. And again, if you start to look at what works for you, then you can start to buy something that's more similar to what works for you, is kind of my thought with that.
That's a great way to look at it. I have very wide feet. I've got large feet, you know, big paws on a puppy, I heard when I was a kid, you know, and that's, my feet have always been very large. I wear a 13.4E. So I need a larger toe box. And there was a company that was making these shoes with a very wide toe box. Now, they looked a little like clown shoes. I'll be the first to admit it. I put my foot in it and thought it really gave me a lot of support, and they felt comfortable. And they weren't a zero drop, but when I say drop, the heel is at a zero drop, the heel is level with the toes. And this was, I think, a 4 millimeter drop. And the average shoe is, from what I understand, 12 to 16 millimeters, the average like sneaker running shoe. So a 4 millimeter drop is pretty flat. And it felt incredibly comfortable. It was wonderful. I wore that shoe, though, that brand of shoe for probably 5 or 6 years until they changed, because they did look like clown shoes. And suddenly they wanted to be more fashionable. So their toe box went from, they call it their classic model, to their streamlined model, which was the same as every other shoe on the market. And I bought a pair and I put my feet, I said, why is this tight? This used to give me more space. And I looked it up, and sure enough, they changed that. Shoe company is notorious for that.
Yeah, all the time. All the time.
So I found that I actually have to wear a 4E to a 6E to let my toes actually have room to move. And you're right. I found that a lot of people, they never get their feet measured. They've been wearing the same size shoes they have since they were in college or high school or whatever, without realizing that our feet change throughout life, and they do spread out a little bit. And maybe you should get measured.
And for women, especially during pregnancy, apparently pregnancy is a major time for foot changes. So, you know, if you are pregnant or have been pregnant recently, just maybe get your feet measured again. Or next time you go to buy shoes, have them put you on that nice little thing and figure out what's happened. Because I've had a lot of women who've gained at least half a size in length, and sometimes gone from, you know, a B to a C or an A to a B in width just during pregnancy because of the hormones and the weight change.
The person who actually asked me the question that brought this up on an email yesterday, she had that happen with her pregnancy. She had these very cute shoes that she loved, and she said after she was pregnant, I can't wear any of my shoes. She had to go and buy all new shoes. And I didn't really understand, because it's not as though she changed physically. She was still the same, but it did change with the pregnancy.
Yep.
So that's interesting.
A lot of women have that experience. They come out of pregnancy and go, why do I have to get rid of all my shoes in my closet? You know, or half of them don't fit anymore, just because things change. The other thing too that I work on a lot in terms of just people's feet is a couple things. One is how much mobility there is in the metatarsal of the shoe.
Yes.
Right. So is that flexible or is that not flexible? Now, if you're looking for, you know, ideal running mechanics, and I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth now, ideal walking, running mechanics, I want some mobility there, because that allows you to basically load the foot and then push off the toe and get some propulsion through your body. Yeah. On the other hand, if you have a big toe problem, if you have a bunion, if you have a rigid big toe, if you have other issues which are really painful in that metatarsal, you may want a stiffer shoe, because it's going to decrease the amount of mobility that you have there. Right. So again, somebody's going to say, oh, you really should wear a barefoot shoe, but you've got a really, really stiff big toe. And every time you're bending now, you're getting more mobility there than it's used to. You're going to get pain.
Yes. And that's what happened to me. Years ago, for some reason, I just started getting pain in my big toe and didn't think anything of it. Thought I bumped it into something. And I went for a long walk in Hawaii. I went around Diamond Head, and at one point I heard a snap like a twig, but I'm sure it was internal. And suddenly I could barely walk on my left foot, and I still had about a quarter mile, half mile to get to the car. I made it. By that evening, half of my foot was black and blue. And it was sort of that going over the edge. After that, I had nothing but problems. And it wasn't until I saw a person who builds custom orthotics who took one look, and he's a physical therapist. So he took a look. He said, "Oh, yeah, you have arthritis in your big toe." And I said, "Oh my gosh, absolutely. I would never have thought." I was in my late 40s at the time. And he made me some orthotics and put a piece of metal in there. Believe it or not, the first piece of metal he put, I broke with one step. He was like, "Okay, you need something a little more rigid." Got it. And it was because the shoes I had were super flexible. And I didn't even think about that. They were incredibly flexible at that metatarsal junction. So we put a thicker piece of metal in, and suddenly it gave me some rigidity, which I needed. So it wasn't bending as much, and worked like a charm. And now I have, barely any issues with it, maybe a couple times a year, especially if I spend time out of my shoes or out of my orthotics. So again, for me, I found that the more rigid shoe really did help. And I switched to a more rigid shoe as well. And so that worked for me and really helped a lot. But for you, having, something that has more flexibility feels more like Barefoot for you. So that seems to be better for you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is really just where we want you to, I think we're just throwing out a bunch of ideas of things for you to think about in terms of your footwear, instead of just taking what either the internet or a specialist or your shoe salesman tells you to buy. Think about what your foot might need, given your past experience with shoes, what feels comfortable, what kind of activities you do. One other classic, I had a client who's, a little bit older, and she came in and she's like, I've been kind of, my bottom of my foot's hurting. So she's getting some plantar fasciitis. And she has one of those feet that is has a very high arch and rather a stiff foot, and tends to be a little bit supinated. And I said, "Well, how long have you had your shoes?" She said, "Oh, these are my favorite tennis shoes. I probably had these since." Right, and she's looking like you can watch her flipping the pages of the calendar in her head, right?
Yes, I know.
I've had these for the last 3 years, and she's relatively active. She walks a lot and she moves a lot. So I'm thinking, okay, those shoes is broken down.
Yep.
Right. And so with her, it was a classic thing. I said, well, first thing you want to think about is think about some arch support, because given your high arch, probably that flexibility, that arch flexing more than it's used to, is probably what's causing the irritation. So she started with that, and then she got, a pair of shoes that had a better arch support, and voila, that plus a little mobility, a little stretching, a little exercise, her pain went away. And then I said, okay, when are you going to buy your next pair of shoes? Not in 2028. Thank you very much.
Right.
And she's like, okay, now I get it. These you gotta keep up with this.
One of my clients came in this week and said, I was like, ta-da, take a look at her new shoes. I was like, fantastic, because I had mentioned to her a while ago that she needed to do it. I said, when did you buy those other ones? She said, before the pandemic. And I went,
right, exactly.
Wow. Okay. She said, I don't remember when before that. And I bought them online. I said, okay, you bought them online before the pandemic. Okay. And she said, and they were a half a size too big, but I was too lazy to return them. So I just wore them. I said, so you wore the wrong size shoe.
For 6 years?
For 6 years.
Holy moly.
I said, okay. And she said, no wonder I've had balance issues, because literally during some exercises, she's had balance problem, and again, we're all getting a little older. So I was thinking, okay, we just need to focus on balance. And she said, now I feel like I have better control of my foot. I'm thinking, man, no kidding.
Yeah.
And she took care of those shoes so they didn't look old.
Yeah. Well, that's
I don't know about you. I've seen some shoes. I had one client come in, and I asked him, I said, how old are those shoes? He had never, he said, well, I think I bought these the last time I joined a gym. I said, what year was that? He said, I think it was in the 80s, 1980s, late 1980s. They've been sitting in his closet. I said, I think technology has changed since then. Maybe you want to change that. That was the oldest I'd ever heard. But he said, yeah, it's been at least since like 88 or something. I said, all right, well, we now know what you're doing today. You're going to a shoe store. We're going to get you a new pair. Because you need to have a little better support on your feet. So I will highly recommend, if you are seeing a new client or your current client, just take a gander at their shoes. If they look old and broken down, it's not a bad idea to just say, how old are those?
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they only wear them to work out and they're only working out with you a couple times a week, or, maybe once a week or whatnot, if they're more than a year old, chances are they're not giving them the support they need.
Yep.
Just a thought.
Just a thought. And if there's any foot issues at all, always take a look at their shoes, and not just take a look and see if they look worn or not, because a lot of shoes, especially nowadays, are really designed to look fine on the outside kind of forever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, they
and
really
if you
they
come
last.
in the washing machine or whatever, they last, but doesn't mean that the inside's lasting. It doesn't mean that foam, that cushioning, or that support is lasting, because you can't really see that so much. The other thing I look at a lot is the bottom of the shoe, and just notice, like, what's the wear pattern? Because sometimes the client will say, oh yeah, I've had these shoes, like, I don't remember when I last got these. And you take a look at the bottom of the shoe, and you realize half of the tread is worn off. Like, that's how long they've had it. Okay, that's a sign of an old shoe.
It's like a bald tire.
It's like a bald tire, exactly. You'll also see, like, if a lot of people wear out at the lateral side of their heel. Like, that'll get really funny, or you'll kind of see that there's funny wear patterns. Maybe it's on the inside of the foot if they're real serious pronators, or it's the outside if they're real serious supinators, and you'll just kind of see where the wear pattern is, and if the wear pattern is even on both feet. I know this gets a little bit more subtle, but sometimes that's just interesting to note, because then if somebody has a lot of biomechanical asymmetries, you start to play with what's happening at their ankle and their knee and their foot and their hips, and what's going on.
Yep. Now, I do want to bring up one brand that was out a long time ago, and it's sort of, that brand hasn't made a comeback, but types like it have. And these are those roller shoes. MBT, Barefoot technology, was huge, 5-7 years ago, something like that. And a lot of clients came in with them. They were super squishy, and they almost were rounded at the bottom. So they forced you, they forced you to rock forward, rocker shoes. And now there are a lot of shoes, or a few brands that are coming out. Hoka's are one. There's a few different ones that have a similar type of design. They're very squishy, and they do allow more of that. And for people with big toe issues, actually, it does take pressure off that big toe, because it allows you to roll through without bending the joint. So for some of those people, it can make a difference.
Right.
However, almost every single client, when the MBTs first came out, almost every client that came in after about 6 to 8 weeks started developing back problems.
Yeah.
Almost to a person.
Yep.
They were turning off their glutes. They were no longer having to use the posterior aspect of their leg to propel themselves. The shoe was actually propelling them. So their glutes shut off practically. And I was noticing it, because I kept thinking, our workouts weren't changing that much, but they were doing long walks and things, because finally they could walk without toe pain. I had a number of people with big toe issues. And suddenly we realized, it's pushing you forward. You're not pushing yourself anymore. It's almost like being on a treadmill. You're keeping up with it rather than propelling your body forward.
And this is like,
it's just happens.
Wild. Yeah. No. And it doesn't take, again, speaking to the women out there, if you've ever had to spend a lot of time in high heels, how that changes your posture. It's not subtle. And even if it's a low heel, right, you feel how your pelvis usually kind of comes forward, your back arched a little bit. You've got to figure out what your knees need to do. It just changes things. And one other little aspect of this is what Brian was talking about the drop, or the rise, if you will, of the distance between the heel and the ball of the foot. And what is that? Is that flat? Is it 4 millimeters? Usually pretty short, really short. Actually, that's really tiny. But oftentimes, as Brian said, it's usually 12 to 16 millimeters. Is kind of more normal for a running shoe. And again, just that slight lift of the heel really changes how the force goes through the ankle, through the knee, through the hip, and then up into the low back. So one thing that I often say is, okay, well, if you really, need to get a little bit more activation into extension, a little bit of a higher heel is helpful.
Mm.
I mean, just, that's sort of a general idea.
Mhm.
If on the other hand, you tend to be like really tight in the low back, sometimes I say a little bit of a lower heel sometimes just opens
Yep.
that up just a bit. And I mean, 4 millimeters is like nothing. So I'm not talking major changes, but you might want to think about a little bit of less, lower drop if you're trying to kind of flex slightly, a little bit of a
Yep.
higher drop if you really need to support that extension. So those are
Yeah.
little things, but all of those can really help you find a shoe that might just make your body happier. And then the
Yeah.
other thing too is if it isn't working, give it up,
Yes.
like it's like how many clients have you had and I had? You're like, well, I know this is the right thing for me. The doctor said, or the internet
Mhm.
said, or Dr. Google said this was going to save my life.
Yep.
I'm really like, on my hips aching and my knees aching. You're like, I don't think it's working.
Yep. I've had a number of people go into shoe stores. Now, Washington, D.C. area, we have a lot of really good shoe stores with knowledgeable people. And I'm
Yes.
going to tell the advice right now, the same advice I give to them. Go during the week, because the people
Yes.
who have the best hours are usually the ones who have been there the longest and often have more experience. The weekend crew, usually maybe younger people, maybe or maybe not as experienced. I also ask that person, what do you do for exercise? Because if they're a big time runner and I'm not,
Yeah.
they may want to put
Yeah.
me into a running shoe and I may not be interested in that. So you have
Right.
to find out that information. But there are times when they listen to the person because this is supposedly the shoe expert. Ask them, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been fitting shoes? And if they recommend any orthotics, over the counter orthotics and things, just explain why. And, don't say, oh, because it's going to help. That's not specific enough. You haven't,
Yeah.
did they watch you walk? Did they have you stand so they can see, are you a pronator or a supinator? They need to watch you move in order to give you a good suggestion and to recommend anything. And if they have not done that, then do not necessarily take their advice as gospel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was recently at a very well-known running store. I will not name them on our podcast. And it was also very clear the bias that they all had.
Mhm.
Like there were certain
Yes.
shoes they were clearly trying to sell.
Yeah.
Like it was just clear from the moment I walked in, because I didn't really want what they were. I didn't want what they had. Basically, I was looking for something, minimal. I like minimal drop, and I like not a whole lot of cushion. And they're like, "Oh, you
Mhm.
really need a Hoka." Like, I don't need or want a Hoka. Hoka's like sitting on a marshmallow, which just doesn't. It's just not what I was looking for. For other
Yep.
people, it works great. It was not my cup of tea.
Not your thing. Yep.
Not my thing. And so that was the other thing too, was recognizing like what brands do they have? They really
Mhm.
had a large number of brands, but all in the same style. Like they clearly had
Mm.
this is what you should be wearing. And almost all the shoes in there reflected their viewpoint, which was
Mhm.
fine. That was their viewpoint. But that's the other thing too, is shoe companies, especially good running shoe
Mhm.
stores, often get into bed with certain suppliers and certain brands and create kind of a culture or a belief or a dogma around what you should be wearing, which
Yep.
probably is 85% of the time is great, and for the other 50% is just not appropriate. But you don't know that
Yeah.
until you try it.
And also, it's what's the latest, greatest thing. People see it on the internet,
Exactly.
they see it on social media or whatever.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so they jump on board. And look, you have to figure out what's right for you. You can't trust that what worked for your best friend or your kids or that influencer you saw online is going to be what your foot needs. So I highly recommend try things. And a lot of shoe companies now will let you try them out and return them. As long as you wear them around the house. If you're not going to go into a shoe store, there aren't as many shoe stores as there used to be 20 years ago. I'll sometimes buy 3 or 4 pair. And yes, it's a lot up front, but I'll try it on. I might wear it for at work. It's indoors. They're not going to get dirty. They're just going to walk around for when I'm here. I'll say, how do they feel? Man, these are hurting my feet. They're going back.
Yeah,
And I may find
exactly.
ones that, and I found a brand that works for me. And out of that, the brand I love, but only a couple of styles work for me. So
Right.
again, it's a trial and error. And
Yeah.
when I do find it, I'll buy 3, 4, 5 pair, especially at the end of the season, if I know they're coming out with a new one, because I have a weird size, 13 4Es, kind of weird, I will see, okay, when's the sale coming up? Because I will buy a bunch and put them in the closet. Because then I have them, and I have them for a while.
Now, I want to bring up one other little thing, because one of the things that, I have a number of Pilates teachers that I work with that are very intent on foot therapy, right? Foot strengthening, foot mobility, and really managing a lot of foot issues through increasing foot strength and mobility, which I think is great. One of the things, and I've said this before, I think, but I'll say it again here. One of the things that I find is my higher goal is to help that client become comfortable and able to do what they need to do. In this case, it's particularly like walking, running, moving around. Because if they can't do that, then their fitness is going to suffer, period, right? So that's not a good thing. And with a lot of the more dogmatic people that I've worked with, it's like, oh, well, you have to do this. You have to wear a barefoot shoe because it's going to make your foot work more, and you have to do these exercises. And over time, that may improve your situation. And if you've got a client who is willing to do the work and willing to, like, roll their feet out or do their exercises or whatever on a regular basis, and you're working with them in the apparatus, or in Brian's case in the gym, and you're really working on their feet, that's great. And that is how you can make progress. And often they can then need less support in their shoes or have better success with their feet. But I can't tell you how many clients I have and have had who are like, they just, sometimes they're honest, sometimes they're not, but they are not going to do that. They're not going to do their exercises. They're not going to stretch every day. And in that case, it's like, okay, if you're not willing to do the work, and it's okay that you're not, I just need to know that, then you may need more support from your footwear, right? You may need a more rigid shoe. You may need a little bit more arch support. You may need a little bit more or less mobility at the metatarsal, depending what your situation is. Because I want you to be able to walk. I want you to be able to walk and move comfortably. That's like my number one priority. And again, if I can get your feet stronger and make you more effective, great. But if you're not willing to do that work, then let's at least get you so that you can walk and move comfortably.
Function is the most important thing. And yes, there are some people who absolutely need more support. There are some people that need more mobility. Everybody's a little bit different. I always say, be careful of the person who says that one way is the only way.
Right.
And we see that in our industry a lot. We see people that get stuck on one dogma, and that's the only thing that they're going to do. And I think you and I both know some people who when I first got into doing rehabilitation type of work, I have a friend who believed that everything starts at the feet, and the feet, everything. I was like, well, cool. I believe that there's a lot that can be said for that, but that's not the only thing that there is. Sometimes it's the hips, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. So again, some people just have that sort of philosophy, and they can get really entrenched in it. And sometimes it's good to have a wider view, to look back and to have a wide lens and say, okay, it may be this, it may be that. So to try different things. But you're absolutely right. If they're not willing to do the work, it makes no sense for them to go out and pay $150 for shoes that are only going to hurt.
Right. Exactly. A couple of the little things, and these are silly things, but again, because of my foot things and working a lot with dancers who have a lot of weird foot stuff. There's some very simple tricks that you can sometimes play with in your shoes too. So for example, people who have neuromas, which usually means like one metatarsal or one toe is like painful or numb or whatever. And a lot of times it's because of a pinched nerve between the metatarsals or somewhere up the chain. Or let's say somebody has a bunion on the big toe, right? A big swollen bunion, and the toe's kind of going over to the side. And so there's a lot of pain when they walk, either on the outside of the foot or the lateral side of the foot if it's more of a neuroma typically, or on the big toe if it's more of a bunion or something else going on there. And one of the things that I sometimes tell clients and that they'll do is if you just cut a little hole in your insole where you want less pressure, you can sometimes just solve some of those problems easily. Not necessarily easily, but it often will decrease pain. Again, if you're in a situation where you just need to manage something, or you've, got foot gear that works okay for every other reason, just take the insole out, cut a little hole for so it gives a little bit of space for, let's say, the metatarsal if there's an aroma, or for the big toe joint if there's a big toe problem and it needs a little bit more ease. Sometimes those are kind of simple things. There also are really cheap all kinds of insoles that you can just buy to put in. A lot of the people that I know, or there's certainly a giant market for custom insoles, which are like huge amounts of money, a lot of them, and oftentimes are very rigid and may or may not solve the problem. And I just suggest, before going down that road, if you've been headed in that direction, go to your basic pharmacy and buy insoles and see if any of those make the difference for you. Getting more arch support or getting more padding. Sometimes that'll make all the difference as well. So anyway, I just want to throw out some other footwear options.
Yeah, that's something to think about too, is the over-the-counter stuff, because there are some, and yes, we're not going to necessarily name names, but there are some that will deal with the heel and some that will deal with the arch.
Yep.
They both can correct a foot issue 100%. So try them both and see which one feels better. Because I found the one that corrected the heel didn't help me at all. It was too rigid. It hurt. The one that helped correct the arch just gave me enough of a lift, felt wonderful. And I thought, oh my gosh, this really works great. So again, try them both. And yes, they do cost some money. There's going to be some trial and error, but when you find it, stick with it. I used that insole until I got the custom ortho that I said a buddy of mine made me. I wore those insoles for years because they really did help. They didn't help the big toe, but they help with arch support. They're wonderful.
Right. And these can be simple and inexpensive solutions.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Right. So sometimes if the rest of the shoe seems fine, or maybe your shoe's getting old, you can't afford a new pair today, try buying a new insole. Sometimes that will, again, give you a few more weeks or months in that shoe. So there's just a lot of ways that you can make yourself comfortable. And you should be. Like, the whole point of tennis type shoes, which is pretty much what we're talking about here, is to allow you to move comfortably through the world, right? And do what you need to do. And if you can find a way to do that, whether it's through experimenting with the shape of the shoe, the size of the shoe, the support of the shoe, what brand it is, how much padding it is, if you can really find one that works, then work with it, stick with it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, hopefully you learned a little bit today. And like I say, we just wanted to bring this up because a friend of mine asked me some specific questions on type of shoes, and I gave her a lot of what we talked about today in an email. And it is a trial and error. You're going to have to figure out what works best for you. And you're going to have to figure out, trust me, over the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot of changes in shoes, because we've seen them in the last 10.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They're only going to keep changing. But yeah, trial and error, see what works for you. And when you find something, stick with it until it doesn't work for you.
Right. And buy a couple pairs.
Yeah. Buy a couple pairs, because shoe companies are notorious for changing their last. And once they change the last, well, they're not going to feel the same.
No.
Well, thank you guys very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something, gave you a little practical information on the feet and on shoes. So hopefully you learned a lot. You can always check us out on Instagram at Moving Combos. You can also email us at movingcombos@gmail.com. Hit that like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And for Nora St. John and Brian Ritchie, we'll see y'all next week.
Bye, guys.